Every great project on the internet, whether it's a massive company or just your own personal blog, it all has to start with a name. And for a website, that special name is its domain. But what is a domain name, really? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this super fundamental piece of the internet and see how it all actually works. It really all boils down to one simple question. When you type something like google.com into your browser, how in the world does your computer find that one specific place out of billions of websites? I mean, it feels like magic, right? It's practically instant. But as you can probably guess, it's not magic, it's just a really cluttered system. So here's the big secret. Computers don't actually use names at all. Nope. They talk to each other using these long strings of numbers called IP addresses. Every single device hooked up to the internet has one. But just imagine for a second, could you remember a number like 66.249.66.1 for every single site you visit? No way, it'd be completely impossible. And that's the exact problem that domain names were invented to solve. To make life easier for us humans, we created domain names. And honestly, the absolute best way to think about this is with a really simple analogy. A domain name is basically your website's street address. That's it. It's unique, easy-to-remember name that points people right to your digital front door. So let's just break this down. The domain name itself, that's the address. It's what you tell people, what they type into their browser to find you. It doesn't actually hold your website, it's just the directions on how to get there. But of course, an address isn't much good if it doesn't lead to a real place. And that brings us to web hosting. If your domain is the street address, then think of web hosting as the plot of land you own at that address. It's the actual physical space on a super powerful computer called a server where all of your website's files are stored. You've got to have this digital land to build on. And finally, your website is the actual house that you build on that land. It's the collection of all your images, your text, your code, all the stuff that people see and interact with when they show up at your address. So you see, address, land, and house. They all have to work together. So here's the really crucial takeaway. A domain is just an address that points to a location. The web hosting is the home at that location. And you absolutely cannot have a functioning website without both of them. I mean, an address that leads to an empty lot is useless, and a house with no address, well, nobody's ever going to find it. Okay, now that we've got that analogy down, let's take a quick peek behind the curtain. How does your browser take that friendly domain name and magically turn it into a full-blown website on your screen? It's a pretty fascinating split-second journey that happens every single time you go online. So when you type a domain into your browser, it sends a little signal out to a global network called the Domain Name System, or DNS. The best way to think of the DNS is like the internet's giant, super-fast phone book. It looks up the friendly name you typed in, finds the matching IP address number, and points your request to the right web hosting server. That server then grabs all the website files, the house, remember, and sends them right back to your browser. And the craziest part? This whole process happens in less than a second. All right, so now we know how a domain name works on the big picture level. Let's zoom in a bit. Domain names themselves have a specific structure. They aren't just a random jumble of words. Let's deconstruct one to see what makes it tick. We'll use a nice and simple example, wpbeginner.com. Now, at first glance, it just looks like one name, right? But it's actually made of two very distinct parts, separated by that little dot. And each of those parts has a really important job. Okay, the part right before the dot, in this case, WP Beginner, is what's called the second-level domain, or SLD for short. This is the unique, memorable part of your address. This is your brand, your identity. This is the part you get to be creative with. Then you've got the part at the very end, like the .com. That's the top-level domain, or TLD. You've probably heard it called the extension. You've seen tons of these, .com, .org, .net, you name it. It's the highest level in the whole domain name system. What's really interesting here is that there are actually a few different kinds of TLDs. You've got your generic ones like .com or .org. Those are the ones we see all the time. But then you also have country code TLDs like .uk for the United Kingdom or .de for Germany, which are great for targeting specific regions. And there are even sponsored TLDs, which are restricted to certain groups, like .gov for government sites or .edu for schools. And here's another one that trips people up all the time. What's the difference between a domain name and a URL? Let's go back to our house analogy. The domain name, like geeksforgeeks.org, is the street address of the entire house. A URL, on the other hand, is the full, super specific address to a single room, or maybe even a closet, inside that house. The URL includes the domain name, but it adds extra stuff to get you to one specific page. So, you get it. You know what a domain is, you know how it works. Now we get to the really fun part. How do you get one for yourself? This is where you actually get to choose your name and claim your own little piece of the internet. But I gotta say, it can be a bit of a challenge. Right now, there are over 362 million registered domain names out there. And what that means is a whole lot of the good, simple names are already taken. So finding the perfect one takes a little bit of strategy. So here's some advice to keep in mind. First, try to stick with a .com if you can. It's just the most recognized and trusted one out there. Your goal should be a name that's short, simple, and really easy for people to say and spell. That's huge for word of mouth. Also, it's a really good idea to avoid using numbers and hyphens. They just tend to confuse people. And hey, if you get stuck, don't be afraid to use an online domain name generator to brainstorm some cool ideas. You know, I love this quote from WP Beginner, one of our sources. It says, "Every great project begins with a name. For your website, that special name is called a domain." It just perfectly frames the domain not as some technical thing you have to do, but as the creative first step of building something awesome online. So that's the story. A domain name isn't just a technical requirement. It's your unique address on the web. It's the nameplate on your digital front door, and it's the very start of your brand. So, the only question left is, what name are you going to choose to put on yours?